You can call me crazy. I know that what happened to me is going to make me passionate and like really double down on what I'm saying. And there's something evil going on in this city.
Take me down to the river where the peace won't run dry. Gather round at the river where my soul comes to life and I come alive.
When it is this hot, swimming is on the top of a lot of lists, but don't try it in Lady Bird Lake. Swimming is not allowed, as many of you know. After all, that ban has been in place for 50 years. But do you know why?
In the heart of Austin, Texas, lies a tranquil oasis in the form of a picturesque lake that has long been cherished by locals and visitors alike. But beneath the surface of its serene waters lies a mystery that has haunted the community for over a decade. Rather than being celebrated as a family-friendly water spot, the lake has come to be feared for much more sinister reasons. Since the early 2000s, more than 18 victims have been pulled from Lady Bird Lake after going missing in suspicious circumstances, and many of its other victims have yet to be identified. The strange deaths began in 2008 when the first life was tragically claimed by the depths of Lady Bird Lake in Austin, Texas, when the body of a respected member in the community was spotted floating near the shore. When the lifeless man was pulled from the water, officers found that his hands and feet were bound. There was also talk among locals that the man's head was wrapped in duct tape. Yet, even with these details, the victim's death was still ruled as self-induced. Residents of the area were left grappling with a mix of grief, confusion, and an unshakable sense of unease. The authorities reassured the locals that there was nothing to worry about and that this was simply a tragic accident. But when more men started to die in different but no less inexplicable circumstances, officials regurgitated the same explanation to keep the community's mind at ease. Little did they know, this was just the beginning of a sinister pattern that would grip Austin residents for years to come. As a matter of fact, it's gripping Austin tighter than ever before, right now. While the whispers of a lurking serial killer have finally come out of the shadows and into the light, the locals who are living on what might be a monster's hunting ground are left with little they can do except continue to beg authorities to investigate the cases further. But it seems like their calls for action are repeatedly dismissed as mere coincidence. The police insist that there's no concrete evidence linking the deaths together beyond their shared location, and they argue that what appears to be a web of darkness is, in reality, just a series of horrible but unrelated incidents, a collection of isolated tragedies that defy explanation. But in recent months, the number of fatalities on the lake has risen at an alarming rate, and it's become increasingly difficult to deny the similarities. The same community which was told there was nothing to fear is now left wondering, is there more to these deaths than the authorities are letting on? Is there a serial killer on the loose in Austin, Texas? And could the presence of a chilling signature link the victims to a spate of killings which began in 1997? With the evidence pointing to at least the possibility of a connection between the victims, why do the local authorities refuse to acknowledge that the deaths might be related? We're going to talk about what we know and what I've found. I'm Mr. Black, and this is the disturbing truth. Lady Bird Lake is located in the heart of Austin, Texas, the state's capital city. It's a man-made body of water which was formed when a dam was built, and its original purpose was to serve as a reservoir to cool down the local power plant, which is no longer in operation. Lady Bird Lake stretches along the Colorado River with its northern boundary near downtown Austin, and it's easily accessible to residents and visitors alike. Lady Bird Lake was once called Town Lake until the city council renamed it in 2007 in honor of our former First Lady, Claudia Johnson, who was known by her nickname, Lady Bird. Claudia was devoted to beautifying the city of Austin, and she put a lot of time into improving the area around Town Lake, which was in desperate need of attention. While the lake holds a commanding position in the center of the city, before Claudia got involved, its shoreline was described as an eyesore. Years of untamed weeds, overgrown bushes, and rubbish littered the region until Miss Johnson pushed for city funding to transform the area surrounding the lake. She supported a major cleanup as well as the establishment of hiking and biking trails to connect the various water access points. Nowadays, there's a popular 10-mile trail loop which circles the whole lake, as well as various inlets and reserves dotted along the shoreline which provide a sanctuary for protected wildlife. Exploring the shoreline also offers breathtaking city views which are perfectly framed by the broad sky above the ripples of the lake's surface below. With its beautiful waters and scenic surroundings, Lady Bird Lake offers a peaceful reprieve from the bustling city surrounding it. But while the calm waters hold endless appeal to residents, there's been no swimming allowed in Lady Bird Lake since 1964. And if you listen to the rumors, you might believe that the ban is due to poor water quality caused by runoff from city streets, or that building the dam left dangerous materials littered along the lake bed. But the reality of the swimming ban is much darker. Despite its quaint name and serene appeal, Lady Bird Lake has a much more sinister reputation. Right back in those early days when the lake was first formed, 2 young children drowned while swimming with their family on Mother's Day.
Ali Rendon says he was just 8 years old when he witnessed his 8 and 11-year-old sister drown in Lady Bird Lake. Now, decades later, he says it's still a day that's hard for him to talk about.
Then a few weeks later, someone else drowned at Lady Bird Lake. Then a few months after that, when it happened for a third time, the city council was pressured into declaring an all-out ban on swimming. They later extended the ban to include the use of motorized leisure equipment on the lake and even went as far as to restrict fishing at Lady Bird. It was almost a no-fun zone. Without the option of wading through the water for fun, the lake became popular with water sport enthusiasts who take to the water for stand-up paddleboarding and other non-motorized leisure activities. The parks and trails around the lake are also well utilized for community events, festivals, and concerts, or even simply for families who just want to spend some time together at the water's edge. But no matter how many years have passed, like a shadow under the surface of the water, the sense of darkness at Lady Bird Lake still remains. And despite the ban on swimming, deaths at the lake have continued right up until present day. Except that, in recent years, the victims aren't simply drowning, and their deaths appear as though they may be connected. So let's talk about the victims, all of whom seem to be male.
My dad just gathered all us together and said, hey, let's all hold hands and go into the water.
The true mystery began in April of 2008, when the body of a missing man was found floating in Lady Bird Lake. 55-year-old Riad Hammad was born and raised in Lebanon before immigrating to the United States. He lived in Austin for 30 years prior to his death, where he used various degrees to teach business education. On the side, he taught keyboarding to middle school students. He was known as a generous man who was peaceful and patient. Riad was also deeply involved in Austin-based charity work and even sold handmade goods to raise funds for Palestinian families. On top of his work and community engagements, Riad was outspoken on international politics, specifically in relation to U.S. policy in the Middle East. 2 months prior to his death, his home was raided by the FBI, and 40 boxes of paperwork were removed, but ultimately, no charges were ever brought against Riad. On the 13th of April 2008, Mr. Hammad was reported missing by his wife after failing to return from a trip to the pharmacy. Then the following day, a passerby noticed something unusual floating in the water at Lady Bird Lake. As the current brought the item closer to the shore, the woman quickly realized that what she was looking at was a body. She called the authorities straight away. It was soon identified as father of 2, Riad Hammad. Officials declared that Riad appeared to have committed suicide. There was just one problem with that theory. It completely contradicted the circumstances in which his body was found. The woman who first spotted him in the lake recalled that Riad's hands and legs were bound and that there was duct tape over both his eyes and mouth. And others who watched the body being pulled from the water noticed the same thing. So no one could understand the strange announcement from officials. In fact, when information about the duct tape and bindings went public, the police were forced to make a follow-up statement where they stated that the bindings of his hands and legs and placement of the tape were all consistent with Hammad having done that to himself. They had apparently spoken to friends and family of Riad, who claimed that he'd been experiencing thoughts of harming himself in the lead-up to his death. He was upset about the recent FBI raid, which had the potential to damage his reputation and affect his charity work. However, the person responsible for preparing Riad's body for his death rites claimed to have seen facial bruising and other injuries on the body which he described as looking like he'd been attacked by an animal. These injuries would be inconsistent with a person taping themselves up and then somehow getting into the water to drown. The FBI never brought charges against Riad, and none of the reasons for their raid have ever been publicly substantiated since his death. Mr. Hammad's passing was the first known suspicious death at Lady Bird Lake, but it's far from the last, and even further from being the most perplexing. On Saturday the 16th of October 2012, Austin police identified the body of a man found dead in a creek in Austin as 21-year-old Cole Christensen, a native of Anchorage, Alaska. Christensen, a former student at the University of Alaska Anchorage, was a popular and humorous guy with a bright soul who loved hockey. He was known for customizing jet skis, motorcycles, and anything else he could get his hands on. One friend said, Cole made a lot of people laugh, had a really big smile, and treated everyone with kindness. Christensen spent a lot of his time in the presence of his loved ones at a cabin on Big Lake, his favorite place. He enjoyed campfires, wakeboarding, jet skiing, and all things water-related. It's safe to say that Cole Christensen knew his way around water. Even in the winter when it was frozen, he enjoyed snow machining and skiing. Whether he was teaching himself to do backflips on a wakeboard or similar tricks on a jet ski, Cole never shied away from a challenge. The 21-year-old's body was found Saturday morning at 11:10 a.m. by an employee of Austin Music Hall. Cole Christensen had been lying in Shoal Creek behind the business. Austin police ruled his death as not suspicious, and no further investigation was initiated according to APD. The Travis County Medical Examiner's Office said that Cole's death was yet to be determined, as they awaited the results of toxicology testing on his body. But over 10 years later, to my knowledge, this information has never been released. In February of 2014, Elano Valet was a 20-year-old student at St. Edward's. He was described as a kind soul who fought for the rights of others. His friends say he went out of his way to help people even if it meant staying up all night. Elano was the type of guy who would drop whatever he was doing and rush to a friend in need. He loved racquetball and artsy performances like watching orchestras. He was notably recalled for his infectious smile and for occasionally eating nothing but ice cream for dinner. Not many details have been released when it comes to Elano Valet, but we do know that he was found in Lady Bird Lake, near Cesar Chavez, roughly 10 days after he disappeared. Originally from Maryland, Aaron David Rublick moved to Austin in 2011. In October of 2014, 25-year-old Aaron was working at a marketing firm in downtown Austin. Rublick was hanging out in the town with his friends one Thursday night before catching a cab to get home from Rainy Street. The driver dropped him off outside the Holiday Inn near I-35 at around 2 a.m. Friday morning. Roughly a day and a half later, two fishermen discovered his body in Lady Bird Lake. Police said they saw no signs of trauma on David's body, and they suspect another accidental drowning. 22-year-old Julio Santos III was an Austin native who went to college at North Texas State University. After graduation, he scored his dream job in Seattle and decided to spend a couple of weeks at home before heading away again. He was known for his big heart and friendly nature. And when Julio's body was pulled from the water on June 7th of 2015, his toxicology report found the presence of alcohol in his system, but no drugs. He was found fully clothed except his belt was missing. And just like the other victims before him, Julio Santos' death was ruled as an accidental drowning. On June 18th of 2016 at around 3 p.m., two people fishing in the water on the south side of the Colorado River near the 2900 block of Wickham Lane reported the discovery of a body lying in the water. While the Colorado River connects to Lady Bird Lake, it's worth noting that the location in question is a brave bit south of the actual lake itself. The Travis County Sheriff's Office said they had no reports of a missing person around that time, and the body wasn't in a spot that was easy to get to. It took some time, but eventually, responders recovered the body of a man. When authorities ran fingerprints, they realized it belonged to 35-year-old Fernando Domingo Ortiz. Fernando came from a big family. He always had time for a good conversation. He loved outdoors, fishing, and taking trips to anywhere with a coast. He was described as a gentle man with the heart of a child, a humble and quiet soul who was physically rather quite strong. I haven't been able to find anything else about Fernando's passing, but on his obituary page, some of those that knew him claimed he lost his wife some time ago, and whenever they would see him out and about, he would always mention how much he missed her. His cause of death, to my knowledge, has yet to be released. On Wednesday, August 15th of 2018 at around 7:25 p.m., EMS received reports of another body floating in Lady Bird Lake near 200 East Riverside Drive. After recovery, officials initially believed the man to be in his 40s. He was eventually ID'd as 37-year-old Luis Ramirez. Born in McAllen, Texas, Luis moved to Austin after high school and attended St. Edward's University, where he earned a double degree in psychology and political science. But even with his great education, Luis chose to follow his dreams. His passion was music. He made a living as a DJ his entire adult life, working multiple venues such as Kingdom Club and the now closed Lanai Rooftop Club. Luis is remembered as having the best interests in people. He was an extremely positive as well as a loving and caring individual. He'd give his last buck to help someone out and periodically looked after the homeless. While Luis enjoyed nature and hiking in places like Barton Springs Pool, some report that Luis Ramirez was scared of water and wouldn't dare go near it. As with previous victims of Lady Bird Lake, there are still a lot of details about this case that we just don't know. On October 6th of 2018, 25-year-old Christopher White was in Austin visiting friends and attending the Austin City Limits Music Festival when he went missing. Friends last saw him at around 6 a.m. after he'd had a few drinks and was intoxicated. Christopher told them that he wanted to go check out the water nearby the rental property in West Austin where they were staying. He left without his shoes, wallet, or phone. When he didn't return, he was reported missing. 2 days later, Christopher's body was spotted by passersby near a dock in the Colorado River, close to the rental property he was visiting. Later, his toxicology report revealed the presence of several other substances outside of alcohol. Just weeks later, 25-year-old Martin Gutierrez went missing in Austin. Martin wasn't a local. He was raised in Big Spring before moving to Austin in 2008 after graduating from Texas Tech. His big brother Mitchell recalled how Martin was a caring and loving guy who enjoyed working out and socializing. The night Martin went missing, he had dinner with his brother before meeting up with friends at a local bar. He was last seen wearing jeans and a blue Patagonia jacket, which was the same outfit he was found wearing when his body was recovered from Lady Bird Lake a week later, on November 19th of 2018. Martin's autopsy lists his cause of death as drowning, but his family believes there's more to the story. He had a contusion on the back of his head, and while his blood showed the presence of alcohol, it wouldn't have been enough to impair him to the point where he would enter the dangerous water fully clothed and then be unable to get back out. And there weren't any other drugs found in Martin's system, but there are a few moments of CCTV footage which captures Martin Gutierrez walking toward the lake. In the video, he can be seen dancing around goofily. According to Mitchell, this is not at all how Martin would behave even when he is intoxicated. Martin's family believed that he was drugged in a bar and then attacked when he was walking close to the water. His death tore a hole in his family, and they joined the growing call for action to protect people from the hazards of the lake. There's also the death of Randy Lexvold, who was found dead in Shoal Creek on the 6th of December 2018. Just like the Colorado River, Shoal Creek also feeds into Lady Bird Lake. Randy was visiting Austin to watch his daughter participate in the USA Junior National Swimming Championship when he went missing. A day after he was last seen, his body was found in what can only be described as highly suspicious circumstances. His lungs were filled with fluid, which led the pathologist who conducted the autopsy to determine that he had drowned. But while his cause of death is officially listed as drowning, his specific manner of death is still undetermined. He had several broken bones, including his collarbone, his right thumb, broken ribs, and a broken femur. His head, torso, arms, and legs were covered in scrapes and bruises. The injuries on Randy's body were so bad that police weren't able to identify his age, race, or gender when he was first pulled from the water. However, officials attributed these injuries to a fall in the water, but they couldn't tell how Randy ended up in the creek or where or why he entered the water. All they had to say was that they didn't believe he was robbed because his personal items were found with his body. The autopsy noted that the examiner wasn't sure whether he simply fell, was pushed, was hit by a car and knocked over, or whether he jumped. Thus, the manner of death is undetermined. 21-year-old Christian Pugh was in Austin to see stand-up comedian Tom Segura in November of 2019. He was last seen near Clive and Rainey Street at around 1:30 a.m. before disappearing. He was reported missing at 10:30 p.m. the following day, and flyers with his face on them were put up everywhere. He had left his phone in his car. Pugh's car was found on Slaughter Lane where Christian took an Uber to Rainey Street. The last charge on the young man's card was at Clive Bar on the corner of Davis and Rainey Street. CCTV showed Christian dancing next door at a place called Container Bar. Another video showed his friends waiting outside for him, but he never came out. Miraculously, Christian was found alive 3 days later on the other side of Lady Bird Lake, near Congress Avenue Bridge in what was described as rough condition. He was located deep in the brush along a hiking trail, the same trail Martin Gutierrez was found on. As a matter of fact, considering Martin's case is what helped lead the search to find Christian Pugh. Christian was in a bad way with life-threatening injuries. According to a video he sent into the Honeydew podcast, he woke up a month later with no recollection of anything that happened to him.
So I was in town to see Tom Segura, of all people. Wait, hold on right now. The whole reason you were in Austin was to see Segura, and you go missing for 3 days and wait a month later. I gotta swear to God, I'm definitely telling him this. Tom, Christian went to see you in Austin. Then after the show, he got drunk and wandered off from his group, was found 3 days later, and he woke up a month later, dude. And he's about to tell me his story right now, Tom.
Christian's father told CBS Austin that he firmly believes his son was hit on the head. He also stated that Christian's hands were bruised. According to him, his son was attacked, but he simply couldn't prove it. Christopher further stated, "There are too many people that have gone missing. There are too many people that have been injured. There are too many people that can walk off, and we still have absolutely no answers as to what happened to any of those folks." No toxicology report regarding Christian Pugh has ever been released. His family believes he may have been thrown off a bridge. Either way, he's lucky to have survived. And his incident further proves that public safety in this area needs drastic reform. On the 5th of February 2023, Jason John, known as JJ, went missing after a night out with friends in the Rainey Street area. The last bar he was in was Cantina 512. He sent a text to his girlfriend after meeting a guy in a bar who gave him his DJ card. After speaking with Jason's mother, I reached out to the guy who gave him the card. He immediately blocked me and told me not to contact him again. Apparently, video surveillance picked up Jason walking for approximately half of the time it takes him to get home from the bar to his apartment. Jason was the first of his friends to leave the bar and go home. He was spotted shaking hands with the bouncer while exiting the venue. Video surveillance then picked him up walking for approximately half of the time it would take from him to get to the bar to his apartment. But when Jason's roommate and roommate's friend realized he never returned the following morning, they reported him missing. Apparently, the reason for his early departure from the bar was to take care of his dog, Ruffle. When Jason went missing, the authorities offered little support to his increasingly frantic mother and father. Jason's parents went from one police station to another and were given some numbers to call that went straight to voicemail. When Jason John's family reached Austin, his friends had already started a search group along with Indian American organizations and Austin Marthoma church members. APD didn't seem too worried about another 30-year-old guy going missing from Rainey Street, but when the councilman Mr. Zoe stepped in, APD offered to help. According to Jason's mother, during the search for her son, not realizing who she was, one of the officers asked her, "Who is Jason? I've never seen so many people looking for someone." Another officer told Jason's mother, "You're lucky. You're getting all these services. There are still people under this lake who never got any help." At that stage, Jason's parents had no idea about Lady Bird Lake's murky reputation, but they came face to face with its dark side when the body of their son was pulled from the water 8 days after he was last seen. After a massive search by APD with sonar boats and 2 times by divers, Jason's body was found in the same place he was reported missing. According to Fox 7 in Austin, toxicology reports showed Jason had consumed alcohol before his death, but there were no illicit substances or medications found in his blood. Jason John was 30 years old when he died. On the night Jason died, he was quoted saying, "I love Austin. I never want to leave Austin." For this reason, Jason's family decided to bury him there rather than in New York. Jason's death marked the first unusual death of 2023. Within 3 months, 4 men had been pulled from Lady Bird Lake. These new deaths were a turning point for local residents. Where they had once merely whispered about a dark force running free in their community, they now began to demand that action be taken to keep them safe, and rightly so. Maybe the fear rising to the surface for Austin residents might have been dispelled if, authorities had actually demonstrated that there was no foul play involved in the deaths. But instead, the police fell back on familiar explanations. On top of that, the night he had gone missing, Jason was drinking and socializing with friends, with no sign of anything negative going on internally. He was in a great place in his life. He was promoted from director for business development to a senior director at his company, and he was very excited about his new position. He had a girlfriend, a loving family, a huge circle of friends, and was financially stable with no signs of any illnesses. His mother asserted that he would never go near the water, and he wasn't a swimmer. In her own words, for Jason to have gone near the water, someone would have either had to push him in, pick him up and throw him in, or someone drugged him. Aside from Riad's death in 2008, Cliff Axel, born in 1982, was the oldest of the potential connected victims found at Lady Bird Lake. Cliff was always known as a compassionate and witty guy who loved to write and play music. He was a land specialist known for his expertise in commercial real estate. Cliff was also in his senior year at Harvard Extension School where he made the Dean's List. As well as becoming a member of Southwest Bible Church, Cliff was a part of Celebrate Recovery where he was the worship leader. He married his wife Megan Knight in 2016 before the couple had 2 children whom Cliff absolutely adored. But like a broken record, on the evening of the 25th of February, Cliff spent time drinking and socializing with his friends on Rainy Street. When he didn't come home, he was reported missing. A week later, on March 5th of 2023, his body was found floating in Lady Bird Lake. The body of 33-year-old Jonathan Honey was recovered shortly after he went missing. John was known for his outgoing personality and cheerful outlook as well as his smile, which friends described as infectious. Jonathan enjoyed athletics. Specifically, he was fond of cross-country and track and field events. As an adult, he achieved a master's in science degree in system engineering at George Mason University. John Honey lived in Virginia, but he was visiting Austin for a bachelor's event on the weekend he went missing. On the 31st of March 2023 at around 2 a.m., Jonathan was seen at a taco truck in the Rainy Street area after an evening of socializing with his friends. He was reported missing a few hours later after failing to return to his accommodation. Then on the 1st of April, John Honey's lifeless body was pulled out of Lady Bird Lake. John Christopher Hayes Clark was always known as Chris Clark to his friends. He was a 30-year-old devoted and loving father to his 12-year-old son. He was known as a fun-loving guy with a great sense of humor and the kind of person who brightened any room he walked into. On April 15th of 2023, APD received multiple emergency calls from residents claiming to have spotted another deceased person in Lady Bird Lake. It was Chris. Initially, a homicide unit responded, but police later stated again that nothing suspicious was discovered. His cause of death has not yet been released, but at the time of writing, investigators have stated they don't believe there was anything suspicious about the incident. The mother of Clark's child told KXAN-TV that Chris was a bright light in my life and my son's life and in my family's life, and I just want to know what happened, and I just want the world to know he didn't deserve this. Chris's death prompted an unexpected response. Well, maybe unexpected for those outside of Austin, but for those who live or work close to Lady Bird Lake, it was merely the straw that broke the camel's back. It wasn't so much the finding of Clark's body that alarmed residents the most. It was the fact that his was the 4th one recovered from the lake in just a couple of months. Furthering concern, Chris Clark was the 2nd body found that month alone, and he was the 8th officially unsuspicious death in less than a year. But still, that's not the only thing that set the community on edge. The 4 most recent victims had a lot in common. They were all males between the ages of 20 and 40, and all of them were last seen drinking and socializing in the Rainy Street area. In my own opinion, it seems like authorities have been downplaying public concern on these cases for years. It's like they blame everything on the consumption of alcohol and easy access to the lake. But despite their denials, it wasn't long before the demands for an investigation reached a fever pitch, and the APD were forced to release the following statement. I realize that there's a rampant rumor about a potential serial killer here in Austin. We found no evidence of that. It's a horrible circumstance that we have these, and we look at each one to determine the circumstances in which they occurred. Some of them are accidental, but unfortunately, some of the deaths are also self-induced. The chief of police also made a comment at the City Hall meeting a few months ago stating, "Nothing out of the ordinary happened, and a few bodies usually show up at Lady Bird Lake every year." Jason's mother asked the chief how he'd like to be remembered, as an ordinary chief or an extraordinary chief who went above and beyond the call of duty. Authorities say that while a lot of these incidents have occurred at the lake, the circumstances, exact locations, and demographics surrounding these cases all vary. Although some of these cases are still under investigation, they claim there's no evidence to support the allegations of foul play. But I promise you, there's more to this story, which I believe makes the likelihood of these deaths being connected much more plausible. This isn't all the victims of Lady Bird Lake and the surrounding areas. According to a user on Reddit, this is a list of unidentified bodies connected to the area. While these unidentified victims, combined with the victims whose identities we know are highly unlikely to all be linked, it's hard to deny the probability that some, if not many, are. And if they are, those bodies who aren't connected definitely muddy the water when it comes to finding solid links between the victims. So which cases might be related and which aren't? Well, that's a good question, and we'd need a lot more details to answer it. Nevertheless, there's a lot of bodies and similar circumstances surrounding what's happening in the waters around Austin. Most of the ID'd victims appear to be males, and most of them are in their 20s or 30s except for a few. Most of the victims also appear to have had alcohol in their systems. Another relative factor is the proximity of where the victims were found. It's almost always either in Lady Bird Lake or one of its surrounding rivers or creeks. This location factor also applies to where many of the victims were last seen, the Rainy Street district or other nearby bar areas around Austin. Rainy Street is known as a trendy nightlife spot with its array of pubs, clubs, and food trucks as well as restaurants. It's located just under 2 miles, or about a 35-minute walk away from the shores of Lady Bird Lake. Once the Rainy Street area was mentioned as being associated with the deaths, locals began to refer to the hypothetical killer as the Rainy Street Ripper. Supporters of the theory that the deaths are connected believe that someone is systematically targeting young men in the area. They claim that the killer is spiking the drinks with GHB, GBL, or some other undetectable drug and waiting for the men to leave whatever bar they'd been socializing at. The theory suggests that when the target leaves alone or gets separated from their friends, the Rainy Street Ripper stalks their prey down to the lake's edge before attacking them and discarding their body into the water to cover up their crime. Many believe that this theoretical Ripper is either a bartender or a person with similar access to late-night drinkers. And you know, maybe the theory's right, but others claim the men are falling to the hands of a much more sinister and disturbing MO. Cyber sleuths have repeatedly compared the deaths at Lady Bird Lake to a series of mysterious drownings going back as far as 1997. Those deaths have come to be known as part of a different theory called the Smiley Face Killer. Now, while I personally don't link SFK to Austin myself, we should briefly talk about the topic before I tell you what I think might be happening. The Smiley Face Killers, or Smiley Face Murders, is a theory fronted by ex-detective Kevin Gannon. It dates back as far as 1997, when 23-year-old Patrick McNeil drunkenly stumbled out of a bar in Manhattan's Upper East Side. He was never seen alive again. A month later, his body was found floating in the East River near a pier in Brooklyn. While his death was ruled an accidental drowning due to alcohol intoxication, there was no explanation as to what happened to Patrick after he left the bar or how he made his way to the river. Near where he was found, there was graffiti of a smiley face. Over the years, more and more bodies started turning up near spray-painted smiley faces. Kevin Gannon has spent years trying to link a ton of dead bodies across the US to this hypothetical murderous group. But his theory's definitely not without strong criticism. I won't get into it all, but there are a number of good SFK videos out there that dive deeper into the topic. I recommend one by a channel called The Decoder.
These faces, they're some of the more than 40 college-age men who mysteriously drowned, the tragedy spanning 25 cities and 11 states. 2 former NYPD police officers say that they are all murder victims linked to what they call the smiley face killings.
So, are the deaths at Lady Bird Lake related to the smiley face killers? They certainly could be, but like I said, I personally don't think so. It's reported that some of the smiley faces that were attributed to the deaths in the original theory were found miles away from where the victims died. That's a bit of a stretch if you ask me. Also, I believe the reason that the smiley faces started being used more in graffiti comes down to a film that came out in 1994, Forrest Gump. Right after that movie was released, Smiley faces were everywhere. Bumper stickers, spray paint, posters, t-shirts. It was like a big resurgence from the 70s. And while there have been some smiley faces spotted around Lady Bird Lake, I think it's just a coincidence. We can find these faces all across the world in high abundance, and I would likely attribute this to the Have a Nice Day scene in Forrest Gump.
Here, use this one. Nobody likes that color anyway. Have a nice day.
Well, some years later, I found out that man did come up with an idea for a t-shirt. He made a lot of money off of it.
Regardless, the fact of the matter is, men are dying in water at an alarming rate in strange circumstances, specifically in Austin, and authorities don't seem to be seriously considering investigating whether or not the bodies could be related. I think someone better start digging a little deeper. I met a guy named who's been living in Austin and was drugged on July 20th of 2023 while he was on a night out at River Street, somewhere between a bar called Better Days and another one called Sidebar. River Street is about 1/10 of a mile from Rainy Street. I'm gonna go ahead and let tell you what happened to him right now.
Where I started my night on Thursday night would have been around 10 p.m. at a place called Better Days, right in the heart of the Red River Cultural District here in Austin, Texas. Just to give you an idea of the proximity of this location to Rainy Street, you can take Red River all the way down from where I was. Red River turns into Rainy Street. You basically make a left once you go straight. Rainy Street is where all these people have been found in the lake. And we've had about 5 or 6 people, I believe, and just in 2023 that have ended up in this lake, and it just doesn't make any sense. So keep that in mind that it's only a mile, not even a whole mile and a half from that lake to the very bar area that I was drugged in. So I started my evening over at that bar, and it was any other night, dude. I mean, I've been down to the cultural district so many times, never thought twice about being served any drinks. I mean, I can party, man. I can definitely have some drinks. I started my night with some whiskey and cokes, and I had a couple, just 2, and everything was cool, nothing different. We went ahead and hopped on down the road. Off of 7th and Red River, there's a really popular bar called Las Perlas, probably my favorite bar in the city up until this happened, right? And I end up going to Las Perlas, having my margarita. It came out of a draft, not even mixed, so everything's cool. After that, we go over to Sidebar, and I have another whiskey and coke, and I don't remember a thing after that, hardly at all. But I do have little things I remember here and there, and the main thing I remember was I had that drink around 1:35 a.m. maybe, and we left the bar. I literally, walking not even a 5-minute walk, collapse. I'm talking like this, I'm like, how? And my tongue feels like it weighs 20 pounds. My eyes, I can't open them. I can't tell if I'm standing, sitting, floating. I don't know where I am. My friend, tall guy, saved my life that night. One thing that I remember about it that blew me away was the fact that I couldn't do anything. I literally I've never been so incapacitated in my life so fast. I mean, it was like a bomb had went off. It was like, all of a sudden, all I could remember him saying was like, "Hey man, we need to call my girlfriend." And all I could remember, the last thing I said was like, "Get home." Like, what the I was so confused. Had no clue what was going on. So my friend calls my girlfriend and is like, "Hey, your boyfriend's f***ed up. You need to come and grab him. He's had way too much, I think." He gives me a sip of water. I throw up violently. My toes are almost leaving the ground as he's holding me. I go into my girlfriend's car with his assistance. I continue to throw up. I get taken home by my girlfriend. I can barely, I don't even remember anything except falling and hitting the back of my head and my girlfriend screaming, "Get up, get up." 2:33 in the morning, probably thinking I'm pissed drunk, not realizing what's up. God bless her soul. She knows I can party, but I know she's never seen me like this. I know for a fact she's never seen me like this. I've never been anywhere close to this messed up. So she puts me in the bathroom, and I hit my head again in the tub. And at this point, I stay in a bathtub all night, and I don't even remember it. I don't remember any of this. And another thing I think I should mention too, that I failed to mention earlier, one of the things that tripped me out more than anything was I sweated so much. I was so sweaty that, I mean, my shirt must have weighed 2 pounds the next day. I could literally wring it out like a wet rag or a mop in a bucket. My hat that I just bought a week and a half before, tan, looked like I'd worked in it all summer long. I could not believe how much I had sweat the next day. And when I looked at my vomit on my shirt, it almost looked like some kind of weird gel. This was not normal. I knew it wasn't normal. The next day, I awoke at 10 a.m. First thought, what happened? Oh my God, I got a meeting in an hour. I go and take care of things, and immediately afterwards, I start checking my text. My girlfriend sends me a recollection of everything that happened that night. I remember none of it. My friend, he saved my life, and I'm so grateful for that. He texts me, he's like, hey dude, just want to make sure you made it home all right. Call me. I call him. He's like, hey man, I just think you got too f***ed up last night. And I go, dude, we've partied all night in Vegas till like 4 or 5 in the morning. Walked around cognitively. Walked home. Not a problem. Bro, I had 4 drinks last night. I couldn't stand up. I didn't know which way was up. I didn't know what was going on. It's like, this is the most f***ed up thing that's ever happened to me. It's like in my eyes, my head, I just feel like my central nervous system is just on fire. I just feel like I avoided like the most crazy thing that's ever happened to me. Well, later on that evening, I decided to make a post on Reddit about my experience, and many other people came forward with the same exact story. And because I hadn't went to the hospital, I just thought I'd walk it off. Saturday comes around, I still feel like shit. Anytime I feel slightly hot and that sweat starts coming, I go into flashbacks. Like I'm immediately just freaked out. My heart starts pounding. I'm thinking it's going to happen again. The whole weekend I was afraid to even eat or even grab food from anywhere. I have no appetite. It was one of the craziest things. And then Monday came around, I went to work and I still didn't feel myself. I seriously felt like I'd lost a big part of myself mentally. I was still there, but I felt so weak and just kind of timid. It's just kind of a weird feeling. Tuesday comes around and I decide to go to my primary care provider, and I break down and I tell them, I'm like, somebody I think tried to kill me. I'm positive I was drugged. I know myself. Like I said, I've partied a lot in my day. I'm no rookie. I know my limits and I never let it get that bad. I go in and get an EKG. They take my urine, they take my blood, they hear my story, and my doctor's jaw drops and she goes, well, I just talked to somebody with our office, and there's been 4 other people that have came from the same exact bar that have had the same exact story just this week. And another thing that's crazy, I was overheating so bad, I literally don't know how I made it out alive. I've traveled the world, and then not even a mile and a half from my house, man, I get drugged. I have a killer memory. I've never blacked out in my life. And I'm very glad that I have a wonderful friend that watched out for me that night. A fucking angel, dude. He saved me. You can call me crazy. I know that what happened to me is going to make me passionate and like really double down on what I'm saying. But having experienced that drug, I mean, I've never taken any hard drugs in my life. Keep that in mind. But I smoked a lot of weed in my life, dude. And I drink and stuff like that. And this shit was so fucking strong. And it was my 4th drink. It just doesn't seem right. And the next day, I was not even hungover comparatively to some of the nights where I would have walked home. And I felt much worse on those days. So something didn't add up. And, you know, that's really where I'm at with this. I'm a 38-year-old bald-bearded dude who wears Patagonia shorts and freaking rock and roll t-shirts. I never seen this coming. There's something evil going on in this city.
According to many Reddit and Facebook users that frequent the bars in this area, people getting drugged around this location is very common. Almost everyone from Austin that I've spoken to has a story about themselves or a friend that has gone through this horrible experience. And one of the bars that locals keep mentioning is the Sidebar. Sidebar is owned by the same person who owns Better Days. These are the 2 bars he was in the night he was drugged. Unfortunately, Better Days has no cameras, and even though I myself reached out to the Sidebar to view the CCTV from the night he was drugged, the owner told me he was only able to capture video of the night from about 1 a.m. on. The rest had been overwritten, which is odd, considering claims to have contacted him just a few days after the incident. If it were me, the very first thing I'd do would be save the footage from the night in question. But he didn't. Maybe his cameras overwrite every day. I don't know. But if multiple people have reported being drugged in your venue, then you should make sure your security is at its peak for the safety of your customers. At bare minimum, you should have working cameras and make a big PSA via your social media pages to warn people about the potential dangers of this kind of crime. If this has happened multiple times in your venue, then you need to do something more to protect your clients by way of awareness. That will boost your reputation, not cause harm to it. Seems like some of the bars in Austin need to do more. It's important to remember that while everyone is watching their drinks, most people feel no threat from a joint or a vape pen. We as people also need to be more cautious and careful when it comes to all kind of consumption, especially when we're around strangers. And again, I'm not just talking about alcohol. Barnstable Police in Boston warned that altered vape cartridges can contain GHB or other drugs that are used to assault and rob people. They released a statement warning people not to use vape pens from strangers. The press release went out in June of 2022 stating, "The Barnstable Police Department has recently received another report of patrons at a local bar feeling the effects of possible date rape drugs. Although there have been no assaults reported at this time, members of the Barnstable Police Department have been actively investigating these incidents. As a result of the ongoing investigation, information is developed that the method of ingestion of these drugs may not just be drinks. It is possible that the substance is being delivered via altered vape cartridges. Based on this new information, the department is urging individuals that are gathering in social settings to not only keep a close watch on their beverages, but to also avoid sharing or using vape cartridges from unknown people. Be vigilant, aware, and consume whatever you consume only with those you trust. Ensure solid communication between yourself and your group. Let them know to look for you at all costs if you should suddenly disappear during a night out. And if they can't find you, have them contact the police immediately. This is not paranoia, and it's not a game. It's also worth checking out a device that can test for GHB and roofie medication. It's called the SIP chip. I saw it on Amazon. It's small, and it can tell you if you've been drugged or not, and apparently, it does so pretty quickly. The SIP chip company claims 1 drop of liquid is all you need, and they say it's 99.3% accurate. I'll drop a link in the description down below. There's also apparently something similar that's great for ladies called Undercover Colors. It's a fingernail polish that helps you test for whether or not you've been spiked. I'll link it down below as well. But remember, I have not tested either one of these products, so do your own research as to what chemicals they can detect and how efficient they are. But surely if GHB or GHB-causing substances had been used on the victims of Lady Bird Lake, the medical examiner would have tested for it, right? Well, according to online reports, GHB can be out of your body in as little as 12 hours. But a report on Science Direct called Drug-Facilitated Crimes, Do Not Forget to Test for GHB in Hair, addresses the problem specifically stating, hair analysis remains the only solution to investigate these cases. The report cited 2 different offenders who used the same exact MO at different times. These offenders posed as taxi drivers and offered their victims a laced bottle of water upon entering the vehicle. Shortly after consumption, the victims became confused and barely conscious before losing motor skills. They woke up at home the next morning, suffering from amnesia. Their money and belongings had been stolen. Hair samples of the victims were collected 3 to 4.5 months after the offense. The results were sufficient enough to aid a judge to charge 4 different fake taxi drivers with theft by trickery and administration of poison. Investigation into household products presumed to contain GHB or its cousin GBL is ongoing. But when it comes to drugging a victim, there's also the possibility that GHB isn't the chemical being used, but a compound called 1,4-butanediol, also known as BDO, has a slower onset than GHB. And from what I understand, once this BDO is ingested, it becomes GHB in the body. This would give criminals time and likely add to the confusion of when and where things happen the next day after a victim has been dosed and robbed. And while GHB would have a rather salty taste, word is BDO comes across as just a strong alcohol. Many report that BDO, or 1,4-butanediol, is like the crack version of GHB. Of course, This is all just my interpretation of several articles, so remember to research this for yourself. I've also read posts from users of BDO who claimed that when they're taking the substance for recreational purposes, they found it extremely hard to get the dose consistent and right. A certain measured amount of the chemical might equal a good time one night, but then a week later the same amount of BDO might have you on life support or worse. But where the hell do chemicals like BDO even come from? Well, as it turns out, BDO was being heavily manufactured and sold illegally in Nederland, Texas, under the guise of two companies owned by the same person. In 2020, a company called Right Price Chemicals and another called Jake's Fireworks had been operating as a front for selling BDO to people. Right Price Chemicals distributed BDO in 48 states across the country, sales of which generated $4.5 million. Investigators claim at least 2 deaths were associated with the product these businesses were selling. And while those who peddled BDO for the company claim it has use in industrial cleaner solutions, the DEA says it has no household applications. Jake's Fireworks and Right Price Chemicals were eventually caught due to a package intercepted in Florida. The owner of the 2 companies, Jake Ellis Doherty, was convicted and sentenced to 15 years in prison. Many of those who helped Jake in his BDO dealings evaded jail time and are walking free right now, including some of his own family members.
I picture him, in the river. I picture somebody hurting him and he's just left. I think he was drugged. I think he was overserved. I think he was lured over there. I think they're connected. They're too much the same to be a coincidence. It's like, APD's reading from a script.
While there's no proof, I do believe that more than some of the deaths around Lady Bird Lake involve victims who may have been drugged with something like BDO in an attempt to rob them. Even some of the victims who still had their wallets or small amounts of cash on them might fit this criteria if you take a second to consider what might be happening. If men are being drugged by people who want to rob them, I would imagine the assailants aren't trying to kill, but rather incapacitate their victims for long enough to drain them of their assets, oftentimes via their phones by way of fingerprints or some other form of trickery which can be orchestrated to gain access to mobile devices. Biometrics are convenience with a curse. I find a 4-digit PIN much safer. But what happens in those cases if a victim accidentally ODs and loses their pulse during the robbery? I would imagine the robbers have to get rid of the body, and where better to do that than a body of water? I mean, what would you do mid-robbery if a victim dies? Would you take the couple $100, phone, and wallet from the dead victim? Well, you'd be stupid if you did, because when the body turns up, missing valuables would be an obvious indication of foul play which would spark a local investigation. That's something you wouldn't want if you plan to keep robbing in that area. But if a body's found in the water with no signs of struggle, alcohol in its system, and it isn't missing valuables, it's much more likely to be labeled an accidental death or a self-inflicted one. I firmly believe that that's what's happening in Austin around Lady Bird Lake. I personally feel that someone is drugging unsuspecting men in Austin and robbing them possibly while posing as a taxi driver or something. Then when the drugging turns deadly, the body is discarded in the lake where evidence is washed away by both water and time. Many of the victims pulled out of Lady Bird Lake likely weren't tested for GHB effectively, if at all. And that doesn't sit well with me. But wait, a lot of people who have survived being drugged in Austin claim they began exhibiting the effects of that while still inside the bars. So how does that connect to the taxi theory? Well, I think it could be a crew of robbers. In this crew, there may be multiple of what I call fishermen. These fishermen may be placed in the bars where they blend in with other customers for the purpose of dosing them. After, let's say, a line is cast, the fisherman could then make the rest of the crew aware of a description and a location of a possible target. But this setup is risky against CCTV and potential witnesses. It'd sure be a lot easier if someone more trusted was the one doing the fishing. Someone least likely to be suspected. Now, one thing that I found interesting is how the bar scene works in Austin. Unlike anywhere I've lived, bartenders in Austin can work in multiple bars around the town, even if they're not owned by the same person. As a matter of fact, people are known to tag multiple bars looking for shifts on Instagram, and bars do the same in reverse when they're short-staffed. This is often a quick way to earn some extra cash in the bar scene. But this also means the bar may not have fully vetted their staff or even worked with some of them long enough to develop a significant line of trust. This might explain why people are being drugged in multiple bars in Austin and no one is being caught. It doesn't take much to be an entry-level bartender. There's even a chain of schools in the US called ABC Bartending. According to some who've taken the course, it's cheap and only around 30 hours of time before you get your certificate. Probably easy enough to get part-time work with that, I assume. So if there is a crew drugging men in Austin, it wouldn't be hard to have a few people on that crew working shifts in multiple bars, dosing men they think might have a valuable pot to split. The hypothetical scenario could play out like this. Bartender doses a target, then lets the crew know about the potential target. Then when the target starts to feel the effects, the bartender might notice, inform the target that they've been overserved, and offer to call them an Uber. A few minutes later, the bartender could let the target know that their cab is out back in a dark and cameraless area. From there, it's all easy. No witnesses, no CCTV, no number dialed from the victim, just robbery and amnesia hours later. Unless the victim happens to OD. Is this what's been happening in Austin? I don't know. It's certainly more feasible to me than smiley face killers. But this is all just my opinion. But I did stumble upon some stuff that I found both alarming and very interesting. On February 12th of 2022, a man named Raj told KVUE-ABC that he was drugged after a night out on West 6th Street in Austin. At around 10 p.m., he attended 3 bars before being separated from his 2 friends. But after the second bar, around midnight, Raj claims he doesn't remember a thing. The next moment he recalls is waking up at home at around 9 a.m. feeling super groggy. When he checked his phone, he realized that someone else's device was in his phone case. Raj got up and quickly went to the Apple store for help, only to find that his Find My Phone option had been turned off and his iCloud account email address had been changed. But then things got even weirder when he saw transactions in his email for over $2,000 sent to a random guy he'd never heard of. Raj's phone was stolen and his bank accounts were drained. They also made off with his credit card and emptied his debit card using Apple Wallet on his missing phone. They even tried to sell off all his stocks but were unsuccessful due to the market being closed for the weekend. When Raj searched the email that was used to make Venmo transactions, he found that random guy I mentioned before on Facebook and promptly got in touch. And that's when it got even stranger. This random guy also woke up with someone else's phone in his phone case. He too had been out that night on Rainy Street. This guy said his accounts were drained as well. Raj was out around $13,000 after his accounts were liquidated and his cards were swiped at places like Target and Walmart. Pretty scary situation to be in, especially with zero memory of what happened. Ryan Morrissey, the medical director for the Central Texas Poison Center, told CBS Austin that spiked drinks are a common thing. He said in most cases prescription medication is used, as GHB and Rohypnol are no longer the typical go-tos when it comes to this type of crime. He said nowadays it's a liquid called 1,4-butanediol. Yep, the chemical we talked about earlier. And as I stated, if you aren't tested within hours of ingesting it, it can be gone in as little as 12 hours. Raj later claimed on February 16th of 2022 in a Reddit post that 3 different people contacted him with similar experiences to his. 2 from the same Saturday night he was targeted, and 1 from October of 2021. On February 22nd, Raj updated his post to add that a few more victims had contacted him with similar stories. Police reports from 2022 show that 2 individuals were arrested for various crimes in relation to Raj, including drugging, robbery, and assault. As of December of 2023, lead detectives say the case is still ongoing. I want to make it crystal clear that these arrests were in relation to Raj and the 3 other victims that were drugged in Austin in 2022. There is zero concrete evidence that Sharon and Tamia are related to any of the other Lady Bird Lake cases, nor am I saying they are. Once again, it's my theory that these men were targeted, drugged, and robbed in a methodical, organized, and intentional way. All this time, local authorities haven't provided much of a comment while they continue to investigate, and the party line is that these tragic deaths were accidental. But I think there's much more to this than meets the eye. At the same time, there have been separate instances of drugging-related robberies around the country, as well as in downtown Austin. Before I get into this next part, please know that I'm not personally accusing any particular individual of any wrongdoing, especially any acts these individuals have not already been arrested and charged with. I'm just disclosing facts of previously closed cases. I'm not saying that it's an absolute fact that the people I will discuss next are in any way related to the deaths at Lady Bird Lake. In fact, it should be noted that these individuals have not formally been charged with any crimes related to the lake, and investigators or detectives have not publicly tied them to any of those acts. Nevertheless, the fact that these drug-induced robberies have become so common around the country and in Texas generally is a sign of trouble that may not be going away anytime soon. So with all that said, let's get into this. On October 19th of 2022, Austin Police Department announced the out-of-state arrest of 44-year-old Sharon Jacobs and her 23-year-old daughter, Tamia Jacobs, for drugging and robbing 4 men in downtown Austin during February of 2022, 2 on the 11th and 2 on the 12th. All victims were either on Rainey Street or West 6th Street. Reports claimed the women flew into Texas for the purpose of their accused crimes. Apparently, the women rented a car for this purpose. They were also reportedly even registered as drivers on rideshare apps. Sharon and Tamia Jacobs are accused of robbing more than $55,000 from multiple victims by drugging them with over-the-counter medications and posing as rideshare app drivers. There's no mention of how the men ended up getting drugged, but the crazy part is that 5 additional suspects are believed to be involved in this crime spree that saw transactions of the victims' money being made throughout Texas, Georgia, and even Tennessee. Tamia Jacobs was arrested in Fulton County, Georgia on October 10th of 2022. When her phone history was searched, they found that she had looked up different types of medication that can cause tiredness. Tamia's mother, Sharon Jacobs, was arrested in Bay County, Florida, on unrelated identity theft and larceny charges on August 30th of 2022. But that wasn't Sharon Jacobs' first crime of this nature. As a matter of fact, on July 5th of 2017, she and her escort friend Dorothy McGlathery were arrested in Atlanta after tricking a 22-year-old man into getting in their car. Sharon and Dorothy were pretending to be an Uber. Once he realized they weren't legit, he tried to exit their vehicle at a gas station, but Sharon and Dorothy brutally attacked him in an attempt to rob him. Luckily, a witness at a nearby restaurant called 911 and foiled their plans. When police searched the car the two were driving, they found a pink photo album filled with more than 100 credit cards from different victims, as well as a card reader. Sharon Jacobs was also arrested with Erica Williams in Florida for similar crimes in October of 2021 as well. It seems like Sharon has allegedly been teaming up with different people to rob men in multiple states, including the exact state, city, and streets where some of our victims at Lady Bird Lake went missing. Isn't that a strange coincidence? Could a similar scam potentially be connected to any of the bodies we talked about previously? Have APD and the medical examiner done enough to rule out the possibility that some of these men just may have been drugged before ending up in the water? I have no clue. Your guess is certainly as good as mine. As for what happened to Sharon Jacobs, well, according to a report, she was arrested in Baldwin County, Alabama as a fugitive of justice about a month after the last victim, John Christopher Hayes Clark, was found on April 15th of 2023. Since Sharon's arrest, there has been one other victim found that I haven't mentioned. That man's name is Moga. He was found on June 27th in Lady Bird Lake, but there's not a lot of information available on him. He was in his 20s. I have spoken to a member of his family and they're just not willing to speak publicly right now. But based on what I know, I personally don't believe Moga is connected for reasons that I will keep to myself, and that's just out of respect. There are a lot of missing details, but according to the APD report, we do know that Sharon worked in Austin with a crew of at least 6 other people according to police documents. And we still don't know the identity of those people. It doesn't appear like APD does either. If this is an organized crime crew, then I'm sure they'll continue to do what they do in her absence. Could a drug-facilitated crime be the fall of any of the men in Lady Bird Lake? If so, how often does this type of thing occur? Well, asking that question opened up a whole can of worms, let me tell you. Through my research, I simply wasn't prepared for how often this scam is pulled around the United States. I also wasn't prepared for how light the sentences are for the women convicted of drugging and robbing people. There are a ton of repeat offenders out there, almost always under the guise of an escort or some kind of taxi driver. And these women often work in pairs. I can't cover them all in this video, but for instance, there are people out there like Danette Colbert, who is literally accused of almost identical crimes as Sharon Jacobs in multiple cities across the US. I've personally spoke to and keep in contact with 3 of the victims she allegedly stung in New Orleans. There's also Dominique Berry. She was also based out of New Orleans. but she was drugging people all around the US in order to rob them. And she did so with the help of her pimp, Randy Ruru Shank. Her crimes spanned through Louisiana, Texas, and Georgia too. The couple were reported to have robbed anywhere from 50 to 100 people throughout their crime spree. It all came to an end when a man tracked his stolen phone to a hotel in Sandy Springs, Georgia, which is odd considering that Sandy Springs is one of the places Sharon Jacobs was sending money to when she was allegedly out drugging and robbing men in Austin. One of Danette Colbert's victims also told me that he saw transactions of his money coming out of Nederland, Texas, or Nederland. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but that's the same town Right Price Chemicals and Jake's Fireworks were operating out of when they were selling BDO. What do I know? It could all be a coincidence. I do know Dominique Berry and Randy Shank are currently in jail as their drugging robberies resulted in the death of one of their victims. So these kind of crimes are not something to laugh about. These are not violence-less crimes. People can and do die because of them.
What is going on, and why can we not find any answers about what happened to our children? I mean, how would you like it if your children went out on a Friday night, Saturday night, and didn't come home for 3 or 4 or 5 days, maybe 8 days, and then you find them dead, or you find them with huge injuries that they're going to live with for the rest of their lives that you cannot repair and you cannot fix. And the police department cannot tell you anything about what happened with your child. Nothing. They have no answers other than they walked off. And it might be their fault that they went off this bridge, or they went off into the lake, or they went off into wherever.
Multiple people have gone missing with no change, no progression into the cases, ruling everything is accidental. And it's not. Something's going on. Something is. And I got to meet Jason's family, and it was like staring in a mirror with my family 4 years ago. There's so much pain coming back every day. I saw everything that they're going through.
Local authorities in Austin, and in particular around the Rainy Street area, claimed they're putting their resources into improving the safety of the environment. In response to public calls for action on the alarming rate of deaths at the lake, the police have increased foot patrols in the Rainy Street area, and the city council has been trying to improve the lighting and the barriers on the trails. In order to enter the water, a person would need to climb over a fence and make their way down a relatively steep trail. This is not a situation where a drunk person would likely fall over the rail and just slide into the water. According to what I've been told by people who live in Austin, it would take a lot more effort to get from the trail to the water's edge, which is a factor that seems to have been widely overlooked in the statements from authorities so far. If there were security cameras on the trails, we no doubt would have captured the final moments of at least a few of the victims, and maybe it would have indeed shown them drunkenly stumbling along the trail, over the railing, down the bank, and into the water. But I don't believe these men just happened to wander out of a bar and magically end up in the water by accident. I believe there's a crime ring connected to this, but I don't have any solid proof. What I do know is that similar crimes have occurred across America. Most recently in New York City, where the deaths of 2 men who've been robbed and drugged has been ruled as a homicide. These 2 men were killed as they left bars in Hell's Kitchen. John Umberger, 33, and Julio Ramirez, 25, were killed after they left bars in Hell's Kitchen. Their assets were drained from their possession via the control of mobile devices, just like what happened in Austin. And Julio Ramirez's body was reportedly found in the backseat of a taxi. At first, police put the deaths down as accidental and moved on. Sound familiar? Thankfully, the family members of these men kept pushing until they found evidence in the form of a paper trail that showed the victims had been robbed around the time of their deaths. They took their findings to the police and had the case reopened. The deaths of these 2 men in New York has since seen the arrest of 6 individuals out of 10, named in a police document alleged to be connected. The other 4 people are sought for questioning. More than a dozen men were interviewed by the New York Times who claimed they too had been drugged and robbed in bars around New York, and a doctor who screened one of the men claimed GHB or something similar was indeed the drug used to incapacitate the victim. What's important to remember here is that the New York Times also printed an article that said, cops initially told the families of New York victims that the deaths were believed to be accidental. The medical examiners did not detect any so-called date rape drug or roofie in either man's system. As already mentioned, such substances are difficult to detect because they stay in a person's system for a very short time. And according to the Justice Department, routine drug and toxicology tests don't normally look for GHB. Of course, New York has its answers, and A clear picture is fast emerging there. If a similar crime ring is working in Austin, these people seem to move around and move fast. I'd guess they likely target multiple victims in one night as an MO. More people, more money. Then bounce to another state with their local foot soldiers on standby until the next round loops back. But again, it's all just speculation, just a theory. Meanwhile, because countless men have died and authorities have failed to find any suspects, the residents of Austin are left waiting to see whether any more men will be pulled from the deceptively calm waters at Lady Bird Lake. With so much speculation and a community divided over whether or not the deaths are related via foul play, no one can be sure of what's really going on at Lady Bird Lake, but I smell bad intentions. Either way, the water has been very quiet lately with no more bodies turning up for months. Still, there's no swimming at Lady Bird Lake. I'm Mr. Black, and this is The Disturbing Truth.
I've been searching in the dark, trusting every clue I found, but the truth has not been told, 'cause every corner of these woods is hollow. I can't see in the dark, 'cause the river's told me lies, 'cause the river